And if the chosen one saw it in a dream but thought it was just a nightmare, have you ever wondered what if your worst nightmare wasn't a nightmare at all? What if it was something far more real than you were ever prepared to understand? What if, in the stillness of the night when everything around you was silent, the voice of God tried to reach you, not through thunder or words, but through images that shook you, through fear that gripped your chest, through a dream that felt too real to ignore? There are moments when the mind sleeps, but the soul is wide awake, and it's in those quiet, unguarded hours, when the world can't distract you, that the spiritual realm begins to speak. Most people ignore it. They dismiss the chills, the shadows, the repeating numbers, the dream they've had 3 times in 1 week. They tell themselves, "It's just my imagination." But what if your imagination is the door to revelation? What if God has been trying to reach you, and the only way to break through your spiritual walls was by sending a message inside what looked like a nightmare? Because not all nightmares come from darkness. Some are divine wake-up calls dressed in terror, because the truth, the real truth, is so intense, so sacred, so world-shattering, it cannot arrive gently. It has to crash through. It has to shake you. And that's exactly what your dream was meant to do. You've been praying, you've asked for signs, you've begged for clarity. And now you're here. You didn't find this video. This message found you. You've seen too much, felt too much, questioned too much. There are things happening in your dreams that logic cannot explain. Visions, sounds, moments that echo deep in your chest long after you've woken up. You know it's not random. You know something is happening. God still speaks through dreams. He always has. Before the scriptures, before the temples, before the pulpits, he spoke to the willing through visions in the night. Joseph received warnings and direction in dreams. Daniel decoded divine mysteries through dreams. Mary received her confirmation through a vision. Why not you? Why wouldn't he still speak the same way? Today, now, directly into your life, because you, whether you realize it or not, are being prepared, you're being positioned, you're being awakened. And yes, sometimes the awakening begins in fear, but that fear is not meant to break you, it's meant to break the illusion that you're ordinary, that you were meant to live small, unnoticed, forgotten. You weren't, you were chosen. Chosen not for comfort but for calling, chosen not for ease but for impact. And while the world sleeps, while most people drown in distraction and doubt, you're being stirred from within. That nightmare, it wasn't random, it wasn't meaningless. It wasn't psychological noise, it was spiritual fire igniting something ancient inside you. Before we go deeper into what it meant, into what's really been happening in your dreams, ask yourself something. Have you ever had a dream that felt more like a memory from another life, or a voice from a higher place calling you back to something forgotten? Leave a comment. Don't hold it in. What you've seen may be what someone else needs to hear, because this is only the beginning. And what's coming next will shake the very ground of your understanding. Let's keep going. And now that you're here, there's something I need to ask you, not for me, but for you, for your spirit, and for what might be awakening inside of you right now. If you've had dreams that left you shaken, if you've woken up in the middle of the night feeling like something or someone was trying to speak to your soul, I want you to write a prayer request in the comments, whatever it is, no filter, no shame. This is your moment to open the door to divine intervention. We're not just making videos here. We're building a space for the chosen, a place where the overlooked, the misunderstood, the spiritually awakened can be heard, seen, and prayed for. And when you leave your prayer below, know this, you will not be alone. We read every name. We pray over every request. This is more than content. This is a movement. And if something inside you feels cold right now, if something in your chest is burning, or your heart feels like it's remembering something it forgot long ago, then this is your moment to respond. Like this video, so more people like you can find it. Subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next, because the next video will go even deeper into what it means to be marked before you were even born. But for now, drop your prayer in the comments. Be bold, be honest. We're praying with you. Let the spiritual world see that you're not silent anymore. You're not running. You're not doubting. You're ready. He opened his eyes with a jolt. The room was still, but the silence felt heavy, charged, almost unnatural. His heart pounded against his chest like a warning bell. The sheets clung to his skin, soaked in sweat. And though the world outside remained dark and untouched by what he had just seen, something deep within him had shifted. This was no ordinary night. This was no ordinary dream. The images still lingered behind his eyes, sharp, vivid, almost branded into his spirit. It wasn't the kind of nightmare that fades with the morning light. It was the kind that stays with you, the kind that leaves fingerprints on your soul. For a few moments he just lay there, frozen in the half-light of his room. His breath was shallow, his hands trembled, and in his gut, that sensation, that strange, electric pulse that something divine had just passed through him. He couldn't explain it, but he couldn't deny it either, because no matter how much he tried to reason it away, no matter how often he told himself it was just a dream, something deep inside whispered, "You've seen something. You've been shown something." That's how it begins for the chosen, not with fireworks or applause, but in the quiet violence of a spiritual encounter disguised as fear. The kind of moment you can't talk about because you don't even have the words. A night like that forces you to sit with silence, and the silence echoes back with questions. Was it just a dream? Or was it a revelation? Was it random? Or was heaven trying to send a message? See, many who are called don't know they're called. Not at first, because God doesn't always introduce himself with thunder. Sometimes he knocks quietly, in your sleep. Through signs, through numbers, through a recurring vision, through a voice that no one else hears. That's why so many of the chosen ones walk through seasons of confusion, because they're being spoken to in a language they were never taught to understand. And maybe that's you. Maybe your entire life you've felt something different pulling at you. Maybe you've seen things in dreams that you tried to forget. Maybe you've had nights where the veil between this world and the next felt thin, almost open. Nights where you woke up at 3:33 a.m. without reason. Nights where your spirit trembled and your mind didn't understand why. That's not coincidence. That's not fiction. That's not mental noise. That's what happens when your destiny tries to speak before you're ready to listen. But now you're listening. You've found this message, or rather this message has found you. And that means you're ready to begin hearing what's been calling you all along. Because what feels like a nightmare on the surface may actually be a prophetic download. The symbols you saw, the place you visited, the people who appeared, all of it might have meaning. But the world doesn't teach us how to interpret spiritual code. That's why so many chosen live in fear of their own purpose. The enemy of your soul will do anything to convince you that your dream was meaningless. He'll use fear, shame, confusion, even religion to make you believe you're crazy, that it was just anxiety, that it was just something you ate. But deep down in the marrow of your being, you know that dream meant something. You know it wasn't random, because even now, just remembering it makes your skin crawl and your spirit burn. That's the tension the chosen live in, the tug-of-war between the natural and the supernatural, the battle between silence and revelation, the thin line between fear and faith. But here's the truth. God is still speaking. The same God who spoke to Joseph in dreams, who warned the wise men in the night, who gave visions to Daniel and Elijah, he's the same God who sends signs to you, not to scare you, but to awaken you. And sometimes the awakening begins with a nightmare, not because God wants to terrify you, but because the only way to shatter your illusion is to shake your foundation, because comfort doesn't awaken the chosen. Pain does, disruption does. And when God wants your full attention, he'll speak in the only language your spirit can't ignore. So if you've had a night like that, a night where you woke up different, unsettled, shaken, then you may have already stepped into the first phase of your calling. You may have already received your first spiritual transmission, and you've been trying to live your life like nothing happened, like it was just a dream. But you can't unknow what you now know. You can't unsee what you've already seen. And God doesn't waste visions on those who aren't ready to wake up. So here's what I want you to do. If any part of this message is echoing in your chest right now, I want you to write it down. Not for me, for you, for heaven. Because something sacred happens when you respond. Something changes when you go from maybe to I believe. When you stop running and start facing what's been chasing you, not to harm you, but to awaken you. If you've been waiting for a sign, this is it. And if you've been silent, tonight is the night you speak. In the comments below, write your prayer. Write what your spirit can't hold anymore. You can keep it short. You can make it simple, but don't keep it inside. Leave your prayer in the open. Let the spiritual realm see that you're ready. Write, I'm ready to wake up, or I need clarity, or that nightmare was real. Whatever phrase feels true to you, type it now. And as you do, know this, I will be praying over every word. Not just skimming, praying. This community will be lifting your name. Your dream matters, your calling matters, your voice matters, and yes, the nightmare was real, but so is the one who sent it. We're just getting started. You see, when the noise of the world finally dies down, when the lights go out and the mind surrenders to rest, something happens in the unseen. It's in that space, where silence becomes sacred and the subconscious opens, that the divine often chooses to whisper. God, in his wisdom, doesn't always use thunder to speak. Sometimes he uses symbols. Sometimes he uses patterns. Sometimes he plants a message so vivid in your spirit that you wake up shaken, unable to forget what you've seen. And if you're one of the chosen, you know exactly what I'm talking about. There's a reason why your dreams feel different, why they come with weight, why they follow you into the morning like a shadow that never leaves. Because dreams, for the chosen, are more than mental processes. They are spiritual transmissions. They are the language of the divine, crafted in symbols, wrapped in mystery, and delivered through the one channel where your logic cannot interfere, your sleep. And it's there, in that sacred space between rest and revelation, that your spirit becomes receptive. Your ego is quiet. Your doubts are asleep. Your eyes are closed, but your soul is watching. This is the place where heaven speaks. It doesn't come in the form of paragraphs or sermons. It comes in images, a door that doesn't open, a figure calling your name, a staircase that leads into light, or a number that flashes again and again, 1111, 333, 555, until you start to wonder if you're being watched, until you feel like someone is trying to tell you something, and that's because someone is. That's the Holy Spirit, subtle, powerful, and intentional, marking your soul with insight. Your conscious mind might not yet be ready to understand. If you've had a dream you can't forget, it might be because it wasn't yours to forget. It was placed there, intentionally, prophetically. And when God places a vision in a dream, especially in a chosen one, he does it not just to inform, but to activate. You've felt this, haven't you? That pull in your chest, that pressure in your thoughts, that sense of urgency even when you're wide awake, like there's something you're supposed to remember, but it keeps slipping just out of reach. That's because dreams are encoded messages, and decoding them requires spiritual awareness. When the chosen ones start seeing these signs, they often feel alone, confused, or even scared. But let me tell you something. Fear is normal when you're stepping into a dimension your flesh doesn't understand. That doesn't mean it's evil. That doesn't mean it's wrong. That fear, that's the boundary of your old self, breaking under the pressure of who you're meant to become. The symbols you see in your sleep aren't there to haunt you. They're there to call you, to remind you that you're not just living a regular life. You're part of a greater blueprint. You're in the middle of a spiritual conversation you didn't even know was happening. Why do you think so many prophets in the Bible received their revelations at night? Jacob saw the ladder to heaven while dreaming. Solomon received wisdom in a dream. Joseph was warned in a dream to protect Mary and Jesus. These weren't fantasies. These weren't coincidences. These were the moments when the divine pierced through time and space to deliver truth to a heart that was ready, because the spirit was finally quiet enough to listen. And now it's happening to you. It's no accident that you've been dreaming more lately, that certain patterns keep repeating, that faces you don't recognize keep showing up, that you're hearing things in dreams you never heard before. This is spiritual alignment. This is divine preparation. This is the activation of your calling. And if you ignore it, the signs will only get louder. If you suppress it, your spirit will only grow more restless, because the chosen cannot stay asleep forever. And if you are truly among the chosen, you will begin to recognize these dreams, not as interruptions, but as instructions. Instructions for your destiny. Every time you close your eyes and the images return, every time you hear that voice in your dream whispering something that makes no sense to your waking mind, that's a download, a spiritual download, and it's your job to pay attention, to record, to discern, and yes, sometimes to pray for interpretation, because God doesn't just speak. He hides mysteries for the hungry to find. And you, if you've made it this far, you are one of the hungry. This isn't entertainment. This is spiritual formation. This is heaven's classroom. And every symbol, every color, every movement in your dream may carry weight, may carry instruction, may even carry warning. The chosen are given this kind of access because they're expected to steward it well. So if the dreams are intense, if they're strange, if they're vivid, don't be afraid. Be aware. Because what looks like chaos in the dream world might actually be order in the spirit realm. And as you begin to recognize this, something begins to happen. You stop treating your dreams like random noise. You start treating them like revelations. You start praying before sleep. You start asking God not just for rest, but for messages. And soon, your nights stop being moments of fear and start becoming portals of preparation. You stop waking up confused, and you begin waking up equipped. That's how it starts. That's how the chosen learn the language of God, not in lecture halls or temples, but in the stillness of the night, when the soul is open and the spirit speaks. This is where your spiritual journey accelerates. This is the moment when your dreams become maps, your nights become meetings, and your sleep becomes sacred. But it requires attention. It requires discernment, and it requires that you stop running from what you don't understand and start seeking the one who sent it. If you've been dreaming things that disturb you, if you've woken up with a message you can't explain, I want to hear from you. Share your experience in the comments. Say, my dream felt like a warning, or I've been waking up at 3:33, or even just, I see the signs. Whatever it is, write it down. Let's turn this comment section into a space of awakening, because your voice matters. Your dream matters, and we are not ignoring these signs anymore. Fear is one of the oldest weapons in spiritual warfare. It creeps in through silence, grows in confusion, and if not recognized for what it is, it builds walls around your purpose. That's why so many of the chosen run from what they don't understand, because when heaven speaks in a way that isn't soft or gentle, when it arrives wrapped in chaos, lightning, and unexplainable visions, it's easy to assume it's darkness. But what if that terror you felt wasn't an attack? What if it was an activation? What if that nightmare that left you breathless in the middle of the night wasn't something sent to harm you, but something sent to awaken you? The truth is, many of us have been conditioned to believe that anything that unsettles us must be from the enemy. But the reality is far more complex, because fear isn't always demonic. Sometimes fear is the soul's reaction to spiritual truth so heavy, so real, so divine, that your flesh doesn't know how to hold it. Sometimes the presence of God doesn't feel like comfort. It feels like confrontation. And not because God is punishing you, but because He's revealing who you really are. The process of spiritual awakening is not a gentle breeze. It's a storm. It tears down illusions. It shakes the foundations of what you thought was true. And in the middle of that shaking, it's easy to mistake holy fear for evil. But listen to me. Your nightmare was never random. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't just your mind playing tricks on you. It was an encounter, an intervention, a divine interruption. And for the chosen, that's often how it begins. In dreams so vivid, they leave you sweating. In visions so intense, they haunt you during the day. In signs so precise, they feel like they're chasing you. That's not coincidence. That's the hand of God pulling you out of your sleep, both physically and spiritually, and calling you into awareness. You were never meant to live numb. You were never meant to live distracted. That's why your dream didn't feel like any other dream. Because it wasn't. It was a confrontation with your destiny, a preview of spiritual realities that your natural mind doesn't yet have the language for. And because your flesh doesn't understand, it responds in fear. But your spirit knows. Your spirit remembers. That's why the fear didn't fully cripple you. That's why, even in the middle of the nightmare, something inside you was watching, not running, observing, learning, receiving. That's the difference between those who are asleep and those who are being awakened. The ones being awakened feel the fear, but they look deeper. They search for meaning. They listen for the message buried in the noise. And slowly, they begin to realize that the things they were running from were actually the things sent to prepare them. When God chooses you, He doesn't just bless you with peace. He prepares you with fire. And sometimes that fire comes in the form of dreams that burn through the illusions you've built around your life. Dreams that tear open old wounds. Dreams that speak names you haven't heard in years. Dreams that feel like someone is watching you from the other side of reality. Because someone is. The spiritual realm is real, and once you're marked as chosen, you're never invisible again. That's why spiritual attack intensifies after a divine dream. The moment you start waking up to who you are, forces that once ignored you begin to take notice. But don't let that scare you. Let it confirm you, because the enemy doesn't waste energy on those who aren't a threat. If you're being pursued in your dreams, it might be because you're stepping into territory that you were born to claim. The worst mistake you can make is to dismiss it, to label the dream as just anxiety or just stress. Because when you do that, you ignore a message that was hand-delivered to your spirit. God is not vague. He is intentional. And when He sends a dream that unsettles you, He's not trying to destroy your peace. He's trying to dismantle your comfort zone. There's a difference. Peace is sacred. Comfort is optional. And the chosen are almost never called in comfort. You're not being punished, you're being positioned. Every time you've woken up with your heart racing, every time you've seen something in a dream that shook you to your core, every time you've wondered, why does this feel more like a memory than a dream? That's the sign. That's the spirit being activated. That's the code of heaven unlocking something dormant inside of you. Because when God begins to speak to the chosen, it doesn't sound like a lullaby. It sounds like war. And you, whether you knew it or not, have been drafted into that war, not because you're weak, but because you're necessary. And that means the dream was not meant to scare you away. It was meant to pull you in, to pull you out of apathy, out of blindness, out of sleep. Because spiritual awakening doesn't start with comfort, it starts with confrontation. And once you've been confronted by divine truth, you can't go back to being normal. That dream wasn't darkness. It was light you didn't recognize yet. It was a message encoded in symbols that your soul understands, even if your mind doesn't. It was a prophetic signal, a divine disturbance, a shake in the spiritual atmosphere announcing that heaven is ready to move in your life, and it's waiting for you to respond. So now I'm asking you, have you had a nightmare that felt like more than fear? Like something sacred was happening? Have you ever woken up with a weight in your chest, not from anxiety but from revelation? If that's you, I want you to drop it in the comments. Say, I've seen something, or the dream is still with me, or just write, God is waking me up. Speak it, write it, declare it, because when you put it into words, you give it life. And when you give it life, you begin to walk in your calling. The chosen rarely recognize the signs when they first appear. And there's a reason for that. It's not because they're blind. It's not because they're spiritually numb. It's because they're being trained in pain. And pain, when it comes from heaven, isn't meant to destroy. It's meant to transform. That's something no one talks about. Most people imagine being chosen as being immediately powerful, instantly enlightened, fully aware. But in reality, the journey begins in confusion, deep, sacred confusion, because before the chosen one is revealed, they are first hidden, and that hiding place is often dark, uncomfortable, and filled with spiritual contradiction. You feel called, but you're not sure to what. You see signs, but you doubt your own discernment. You experience visions, but you question their meaning. You hear whispers in dreams, but you wonder if it's just your mind playing tricks. That tension, that spiritual fog, is part of your training, because God is not just preparing you to receive revelation, He's preparing you to handle it, to carry it, to protect it. And that kind of preparation doesn't happen in the light. It happens in the dark. It happens in silence. It happens when the voice of God seems absent, and all you have left is the echo of a dream you barely understand. That's why the signs feel so distant at first. That's why the symbols confuse you. That's why you question if you're even chosen at all. Because confusion is the test before clarity. Doubt is the final veil before awakening. And if you're feeling that weight now, if you're in that space where the signs are everywhere but you don't know what to do with them, you're not failing. You're being prepared. You're not lost. You're in transition. The disorientation is not proof of abandonment. It's proof that heaven is close. God hides His warriors in shadows before He releases them into the light. He disguises His messages in dreams that look like chaos because He's testing your spiritual hunger. Will you chase understanding, or will you settle for fear? Will you dig deeper, or will you dismiss it as coincidence? The test is not whether you see the signs. The test is whether you believe enough to seek the meaning behind them. That's the difference between the chosen and the sleeping. The sleeping ignore the dream. The chosen interrogate it. But make no mistake, the enemy knows how to mimic the language of heaven. He knows how to take a vision and twist it into confusion. He knows how to flood your mind with fear just when you're about to break through. Because the enemy's greatest fear is your awakening. His goal isn't just to stop you, it's to confuse you into stopping yourself. That's why the dreams become harder to interpret. That's why the signs begin to contradict each other. That's why your own thoughts become the battlefield. Not because you're weak, but because you're close. Closer than ever to the moment when everything will begin to make sense. And still, God stays silent. Not because He doesn't care, but because your faith is being refined, because the chosen are not trained through comfort, they are trained through fire, through tension, through moments that break the illusion of control. Because in order to carry divine revelation, you must be emptied of human pride. That's why the silence hurts. That's why the confusion burns. That's why the signs don't come with explanations, because this is a test of spiritual endurance, not intellectual understanding. Faith isn't proven in the presence of answers. It's proven in the presence of absence. So you start seeing recurring numbers, 333, 444, 555. You start dreaming of places you've never been. You feel like you're being watched. You feel like someone is calling your name in the dark, but no one around you understands. They tell you it's nothing, that it's all in your head. But your spirit knows better. Your spirit knows this is not ordinary. This is the language of heaven. And the reason you don't fully recognize it is because it's being delivered in a form that forces your spirit to rise. Not your logic, not your emotions, but your spirit. God doesn't speak in code because he wants to hide from you. He speaks in code because he wants to awaken you. He wants you to grow into someone who doesn't just see signs, but understands them, who doesn't just receive dreams, but interprets them, who doesn't just hear whispers, but obeys them. And to reach that level, you must walk through the valley of spiritual uncertainty, the place where nothing makes sense, but everything is connected, the place where your heart is breaking, but your soul is being rebuilt. And if you're in that place now, if you feel the call but can't trace the path, know this: it means you're getting closer. Closer to the moment when the confusion will collapse into clarity. Closer to the moment when the disjointed dreams will suddenly form a pattern. Closer to the moment when you will look back and realize that nothing was random. Every tear, every nightmare, every unanswered question, it was all preparation. You've been trained by pain. You've been shaped by silence. And your eyes are adjusting to the divine. You're not who you used to be, and the signs you once ignored are beginning to speak louder than ever. The veil is thinning, the atmosphere is changing, and even though your mind still struggles to comprehend it, your spirit knows it's time. That's why the tension is unbearable. That's why you feel restless. That's why nothing in this world satisfies you anymore. Because you were never made to live like everyone else. You were made to lead, to speak, to carry fire. And heaven is not interested in making you comfortable. It's interested in making you ready. So I ask you now, has confusion been your companion lately? Have you felt like you're being pulled in two directions at once? Have you started seeing signs that don't make sense to your mind, but won't let go of your heart? If so, write it below. Say, I'm in the training, or I'm walking through the silence, or even just, the signs are speaking to me. Let this be your confirmation. Let your voice join others who are waking up, because you're not alone. You're not forgotten. You're just being prepared. There's a moment, a sacred space, where dream ends and prophecy begins. And that line is thinner than most imagine. It isn't clearly marked. It doesn't come with a warning. It isn't framed in bright colors or booming voices. It's subtle, like a breeze in the spirit, like a whisper behind the silence. And yet for those who are chosen, for those whose sleep becomes a meeting place with the divine, that moment is everything. It's the split second where the soul realizes that what looked like a fantasy may have been a vision, that what felt like imagination was actually communication. The portal between dream and prophecy doesn't open for everyone. It opens for those who've been marked, for those whose lives are not ordinary, for those who carry a divine blueprint in their spiritual DNA. These are the ones who don't just dream, they receive, who don't just see, they are shown, who don't just rest, they are revealed to. That's why your nights feel heavier than most. That's why you can't explain the emotions that hit you when you wake up. Because your sleep isn't just sleep, it's sacred space, it's spiritual ground. And within that ground, symbols are planted. Have you ever noticed the repetition of certain numbers? 11:11 flashing on your clock. 3:33 when you wake up for no reason. 4:44 staring back at you from a receipt, a license plate, a screen. These aren't coincidences. These are alignments, spiritual frequencies encoded into our reality, designed to awaken the awareness of those who are ready. They are reminders that the veil between the natural and the supernatural is thinner than it's ever been. They are keys tapping on the glass between worlds, waiting for you to look up and notice. Then there are the lights, flickers in your room with no source. Shadows that move just out of your peripheral vision. Voices you don't hear with your ears, but feel in your chest. Words that echo inside of you long after you've woken up. These are not symptoms of madness. These are signs, but only the discerning recognize them for what they are. Only the spiritually awakened can translate the language of the unseen, because the chosen are not called to live in logic, they are called to walk by revelation. But that's not easy, because the modern world teaches us to ignore what can't be proven, to doubt what can't be measured, and yet the spirit world doesn't operate by science. It moves by spirit. And in the realm of spirit, symbols are louder than words. Numbers are louder than logic. Atmosphere is louder than evidence. You've felt it before. That sense that something is about to shift. That pressure in the air that you can't explain. That moment when a room goes silent, not because of noise, but because something sacred just passed through it. That's the edge of prophecy. And when you begin to walk along that edge, everything changes. Dreams become instruction. Silence becomes filled with messages. Sleep becomes spiritual warfare. And you begin to discern. You begin to realize that you're not crazy. You're not imagining things. You're being trained to see beyond the veil, to interpret the invisible, to become fluent in a language only the Spirit understands. The chosen aren't just receivers of prophecy, they are translators of it, and that responsibility is weighty. That's why your dreams started becoming clearer. That's why people you've never met appear and speak things you've never heard. That's why doors keep appearing in your dreams, or light comes flooding through rooms you've never seen. These are not dreams, they are glimpses, windows into timelines you haven't walked yet. Clues from a God who speaks in layers and reveals himself in patterns, and each one is an invitation to go deeper, to pay attention, to remember. Because prophecy is not just about predicting the future, it's about recognizing the present through heaven's perspective. It's about seeing beyond what is obvious and understanding the spiritual undercurrent pulling everything in motion. It's about discernment. And that discernment doesn't come from textbooks or teachings. It comes from surrender, from repetition, from wrestling, from the nights where you wake up weeping and you don't know why, from the mornings when the dream won't leave your chest, from the days when you walk into a place and feel like you've been there before, even though you never have. That's not déjà vu, that's spiritual confirmation. And you're not losing your mind. You're gaining your sight. The chosen are often misunderstood because they speak of things others can't see yet. They notice details others ignore. They hear rhythms that don't exist in the natural world, and they carry responsibility for revelations no one else will believe until it happens. But that's what makes you who you are. That's why you've always felt different. Why crowds make you feel disconnected. Why you sense energy in rooms. Why you can't shake the dreams, the visions, the symbols. It's because you've been trained in silence, sharpened by mystery, called by prophecy. So now, every time 11:11 flashes in front of you, every time a door appears in a dream, every time you hear your name whispered in the quiet, you stop, you breathe, you listen, because that's the portal, that's the edge. And once you learn to walk it, you'll never be the same. You'll begin to recognize the difference between fear and foresight, between anxiety and assignment, between coincidence and calling. And as your discernment grows, so does your responsibility. Because the chosen are not called to simply receive, they are called to act. If this is speaking to you, I want you to tell me what you're seeing. Have you been noticing numbers like 11:11, or feeling watched in moments of silence? Do you hear your name when no one's there? Are you dreaming of doors, lights, or places you've never been? If so, I want you to write that below. Type, I'm starting to see the signs, or the veil is thinning, or even just, the numbers are speaking to me. Whatever it is, don't keep it silent, share it, let it breathe. Let heaven know you're paying attention, because you are not imagining things, you are being shown, and the portal between your dreams and your destiny is already opening. When the same dream returns again and again, when the same image haunts your sleep, when the sensation of something greater refuses to leave your chest, even after you've woken up, it's not torment, it's not random, it's not your imagination looping in circles. It's a spiritual pattern, a divine signal, and you're not being haunted, you're being called. Because here's a truth very few are willing to say out loud: God repeats what you ignore. When a message from heaven goes unanswered, it doesn't disappear, it intensifies. When a warning goes unrecognized, it doesn't fade, it echoes over and over again until something inside you finally listens. That recurring dream, that repeating number, that emotion that strikes out of nowhere in the middle of your day, that's not psychological noise. That's divine persistence. That's prophecy knocking again, waiting for you to open. And if you're seeing the same figure, the same setting, the same moment replay over and over in your dreams, it's not because your brain is broken. It's because your spirit is waking up to something you've refused to face, something you're destined to confront. Because what you're dreaming about isn't fiction, it's memory, it's blueprint, it's premonition. And every time it comes back, it comes with more urgency. This is what most people miss about the spiritual realm. It's not always loud, but it's always intentional. Heaven doesn't waste energy on repetition unless that repetition carries power. It doesn't send the same vision twice unless the second time you're ready to see what you couldn't see before. Because prophecy grows with your capacity, and your capacity is expanding. You weren't ready the first time. That's why the dream confused you. That's why the voice startled you. That's why the images didn't make sense. But now something has changed. You've been through things. You've prayed different prayers. You've survived battles that weren't just emotional. They were spiritual. You've shed versions of yourself you didn't even know you were carrying. And now the vision returns. But it doesn't come to scare you. It comes to remind you you are ready. This is the moment every chosen one faces, the moment when the message repeats not to provoke fear, but to provoke movement, to call you out of comfort, to call you into alignment. The recurring dream is not chasing you, it's inviting you to decode, to remember, to rise. And God, in His mercy, allows the image to come again, not as punishment, but as preparation. You're not stuck in a loop. You're standing at the door of a revelation you're finally strong enough to carry, because being chosen doesn't mean you always understand. It means you're being pursued even when you don't. It means heaven won't give up on you even when you've tried to give up on yourself. It means the spiritual world is still sending messages even when you've stopped praying. That's the grace in repetition. That's the holiness in the haunting. The dream keeps coming back because God still believes you'll respond. And here's what you need to understand. Repeated spiritual signals are a sign of transition. When the vision returns, it means you've entered the next phase of your awakening. When the nightmare evolves, when the symbols shift, deepen or sharpen, it's because your soul has grown, and the message must now be seen through new eyes. This is not the same dream. This is the dream upgraded. This is the prophecy escalated. And you, yes, you, have been upgraded to handle it. You've carried pain, but now you're carrying power. You've felt confusion, but now you feel the pulse of clarity just beneath the surface. You've doubted, but now faith is growing roots in the very soil where fear once lived. And that's why the nightmare came back, because it was never meant to torment you. It was meant to mature you, to stretch your discernment, to prepare your obedience. It's easy to respond to God when He speaks in comfort. But when He speaks through discomfort, when He speaks through repetition, through fear, through what looks like chaos, only the truly awakened will answer. So if you're seeing the same signs, if your dreams are circling back to where they began, if the emotional residue of what you've seen refuses to leave you, it means your moment is here. The pattern is not a trap, it's a portal, and it opens not through logic, but through recognition, through surrender, through saying, okay, I see it now, through admitting, I tried to forget but I can't, because you weren't meant to forget. You were meant to remember. Remember the face that keeps appearing. Remember the room that keeps returning. Remember the phrase that echoes again and again. These are not accidents. These are sacred coordinates. And the fact that they're back means you've reached the next intersection of destiny. You're no longer just a receiver. You are now a responder. You're not asleep anymore. And once you've truly awakened, the dreams don't just inform you. They transform you. They don't just show you what's coming, they show you who you are becoming. That's why the images return with more detail. That's why the light feels brighter, the shadows darker, the symbols louder, because you're evolving, you're shifting into alignment, and that shift is the beginning of prophetic clarity. So tell me, has it come back? That same dream, that same voice, that same pull in your chest that you thought you had buried? Have you woken up again, heart racing, spirit stirred, and felt the weight of something bigger than you pressing in? If that's happening to you, I want you to write it. Right now. Write, "It came back." Or, "I'm starting to understand." Or, "I know now that I'm being called." Your words matter. They break the silence. They mark your shift. They open the door for someone else to step through theirs. This isn't just a cycle. This is your spiritual elevation in motion. And the dream returned because you're finally ready to see what's been waiting for you all along. When the chosen one dreams, he doesn't just wake up from sleep. He wakes up from everything, from illusions, from distractions, from the ordinary. Because once your spirit encounters the supernatural, you can't pretend anymore. You can't go back to normal. You begin to walk differently, think differently, feel differently. Something inside you shifts forever. And suddenly, the dream that terrified you now begins to make sense. The images that once confused you now seem like code from heaven, deliberate, sacred, urgent. And the realization hits you like a storm through your chest. It was never a nightmare. It was a divine encounter. The moment that hits, the moment you truly understand it wasn't just sleep, but a sacred activation. You begin to connect the dots. All the strange moments, all the repeated numbers, all the nights you woke up at the same hour, all the lights that flickered, all the whispers in the silence. It wasn't paranoia, it wasn't imagination, it was God getting closer. And he never gets closer without a reason. See, people think God only comes through fire from heaven, through angelic appearances, through miracles written in the sky. But the reality is far more mysterious. He comes through dreams that feel like chaos, through shadows that seem alive, through voices that whisper in the soul. And when you realize that, you stop fearing the strange. You start listening to it, because what felt strange was actually sacred. What felt terrifying was actually transformational. That's what marks the awakening of the chosen. Not a ceremony, not a lightning bolt, but a shift in vision. A spiritual awakening so deep that it doesn't just inform you, it reshapes your identity. You're no longer just living a life, you're carrying an assignment, a mission encoded into you before you even entered the world. And now you know it, you feel it. That's why you felt out of place most of your life. That's why you never fully fit in. That's why something in you has always been watching the world from a different angle. Because you were never meant to blend in. You were meant to rise. The awakening starts with one truth. You've always been called. Even when you were a child and couldn't explain the feeling. Even when you saw things others didn't. Even when you were told to stop dreaming, stop imagining, stop being too sensitive. That sensitivity wasn't weakness. It was discernment. That imagination wasn't childish. It was a spiritual antenna. And now, it's fully activated. What you're experiencing now is not just spiritual, it's prophetic. It's not just a phase, it's an elevation. You're stepping into a realm where nothing is random, where every vision, every symbol, every dream becomes part of a greater narrative, your narrative. And this is only the beginning. Because once you wake up, once your spirit opens its eyes, you can't close them again. You start to see through everything. You feel spiritual shifts in rooms. You sense what others miss. You see the patterns in the chaos. You know when something isn't just physical, it's spiritual. And that's why you're here. That's why you're still listening, because your spirit recognizes the truth behind every word. And now that you've recognized it, truly seen it, you're going to start walking into new levels of revelation. You're going to be given clarity that used to confuse you. Your dreams will intensify, the symbols will sharpen, the voice that once whispered will begin to speak, because your faith has expanded, your vessel has grown. And heaven doesn't waste revelation on a heart that's not ready to carry it. But you are ready. This is the moment, the point of no return, the line where old identities die and true purpose begins to breathe. This is not a fantasy. This is your spiritual reality catching up with your soul's memory. You were created for this, for impact, for alignment, for divine fire. You were created to live with eyes open, heart on fire, spirit aligned with eternity. And now, as you move forward, you'll begin to experience something even greater. Acceleration in your understanding, acceleration in your dreams, acceleration in your awareness of God's presence. You'll begin to move through this world as a bridge between dimensions, earthly feet with a heavenly assignment, and that comes with responsibility. The chosen don't just wake up for themselves, they wake up for others, to speak, to guide, to prepare. You will become the voice for those who are still sleeping, the light for those still walking in spiritual night. And that's why you had to dream. That's why you had to feel the fear. That's why the image came back again and again, because God needed to make sure you would remember it, that you wouldn't shake it off like a common nightmare, because this dream was not common. It was a divine signature, a spiritual seal, a prophetic imprint, and now that it's on you, you can't walk the same. You can't think the same. You've been marked, and that mark is holy. But here's the thing, this isn't the end, this is the entrance. This awakening you're walking in now is just the threshold of what's coming. Because the next part of your journey, your real origin story, is even deeper, even older. It begins before you were even born, before your first breath, before your first word. The next part of your journey begins in the womb, where you were marked not just with potential, but with purpose. You were chosen before you had a name, before anyone knew you, before the world could shape you. And that's what's coming next. In the next video, we're going to open what has never been opened before. We're going to explore the truth that's been sealed in your spirit since birth. The title, "And if the chosen one was marked by God in the womb, but only you can awaken now." If this message reached you, if something inside you is burning even now, then what's coming next is not optional. It's essential, because you need to know why you were born, why you feel what you feel, why nothing in your life has ever been random, why your dreams carry so much weight, why the spiritual realm won't leave you alone. It's because you were chosen before you were even conscious. And that truth will shift everything. But right now, I want to hear from you. I want you to take the bold step of saying what's been buried for too long. Have you always felt called, even when you didn't have the language to explain it? Have you sensed something sacred following you since childhood? If you have, I want you to write that in the comments. Say, "I've always felt different," or "I was marked early," or even, "I didn't understand then, but I do now." Your story matters. Your voice carries frequency, and when you speak, others will hear, others will remember, others will awaken. This is your moment. Type it, share it. Let the spiritual realm hear that you are no longer asleep, that your awakening has begun, and that you are ready for the next level. If you felt the voice of God reaching into your spirit through this video, if something stirred inside you, something deeper than words, something you can't fully explain, then this is not the end for you. It's the beginning. I want you to subscribe right now, not just because of a button, but because this space was created for the chosen, for people like you, for souls that feel the shift, that see the signs, that can't ignore the call anymore. This isn't just a channel, it's a spiritual meeting point, and if you're still here, you're part of it. If you made it to the end, I want you to comment, "I hear the voice, I am ready." Write it below. Let your voice join with others who are awakening across the world. Your words matter. They activate something, they declare something, they confirm you're not asleep anymore. And if this message found you, then like this video, because your like is not just for the algorithm, it's for alignment. It tells the system this kind of content needs to be seen, that the chosen are rising and that you're part of it. Finally, don't stop here. The next step is already waiting for you. The next video is on the screen right now. And if the chosen one was marked by God in the womb, but only you can awaken now, click it, watch it, because your journey has just begun.